appreciate all of you. We are going to be having a very important conversation today about what both of our wonderful doctors witnessed in March as they were in volunteering on a mission in Gaza, and they were attacked by the Israeli airstrikes when Israel broke the ceasefire. So I'm going to go ahead and make the introductions. Please continue to like and share the live, inshallah. All right, we have Dr. Feroze Sidhwa today. Dr. Feroze Sidhwa is a general trauma and critical care surgeon in California. He is also a humanitarian surgeon, having worked most extensively in Palestine, but also in Ukraine, Haiti, and Zimbabwe. Dr. Sidhwa has written and spoken extensively about surgical humanitarian work, the United States' role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the political consequences of medical relief work. He approaches the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a secular American and as a humanitarian physician. Dr. Mark Perlmutter is an orthopedic hand surgeon. He is a global vice president of the International College of Surgeons and the president of World Surgical Foundation. He has been on 40 medical missions worldwide. Both Dr. Sidhwa and Dr. Perlmutter recently volunteered at Nasser Hospital and AlAqsa Martyrs Hospital in March. They are co-authors of a new piece for Common Dreams titled, "As Surgeons, We Have Never Seen Cruelty Like Israeli's Genocide in Gaza." Together, they have worked a combined 57 years of volunteering in 3 different continents. Welcome, Dr. Sidhwa and Dr. Perlmutter. It's an absolute honor to have you both here with us today, and thank you so much for being back and joining us again. I wanted to kind of start with the story, and if you guys can answer, each this question. What motivated you to return to Gaza despite the risks and challenges? And Dr. Perlmutter, if you want to go first, and then we'll have Dr. Sidhwa.
Sure. I'm trusting you can hear me okay. Um,
Yes.
the ceasefire was on. I honestly was planning to go whether it was on or not, but the ceasefire was on, and so my primary motivation was to do reconstructive surgery. In my first tour of duty there, I saw and operated on hundreds of kids, primarily with chronic tendon and nerve injuries. I do mostly hand and upper extremity surgery, but in this case, there's a lot of lower extremity pathology as well. 50% of the extremities were, if not more. And so chronic tendon and nerve lacerations need reconstruction. You have to move from a tendon from one part of the body to another part and essentially borrow from Peter to pay Paul and try to regain some function from these chronic, horrible injuries that would be a horrible surgical day in the United States for any fellowship-trained hand surgeon. And so my first couple days there, I was at Nasser Hospital. I then transferred up to the AlAqsa Martyrs Hospital, a few clicks north. And my first couple days, we just triaged. This was a Saturday and Sunday. The day after I got there, I went north and we triaged patients for the elective surgeries. The hospital has 2 main ORs and 2 maternity beds. It's a small hospital, smaller than the smallest hospital I worked at in the last 30 years. But it was one of 3 remaining functional hospitals left in Gaza from the 36 functioning surgical facilities prior to October 7th. And now there's 3. And so, and I was at the AlAqsa hospital when the ceasefire broke on the 18th at 2:30 in the morning. And of course, the surgical planning changes at that point. All the elective surgery disappeared, and the remainder of our stay there was exactly like it was the year before. It was trauma surgery.
Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter. Dr. Sidhwa, I'll go ahead and allow you to also answer. Welcome.
Thanks. Sorry for the technical problems. Yeah, no, it's basically the same answer as Mark, except for I've been working with the Palestinians for probably since I was about 18, and yeah, just wanted to go back and do some more work.
Thank you for all of your work, and we applaud you for everything that you're doing. I'll ask you, Dr. Sidhwa, first, and then we'll go to Dr. Perlmutter. If you could provide a detailed account of what you observed and the events that transpired when Israel violated the ceasefire.
Mark, go for it.
Did you want me to answer first? I'd be happy.
Dr. Sidhwa or Dr. Perlmutter?
All right,
Go for it.
I'll just start. First of all, Israel never honored the ceasefire. Let's make that perfectly clear. Not only did they not honor this ceasefire, it was done so in paper only, but Palestinians were killed every single day, murdered every single day during the purported ceasefire, without a comparable statement being made conversely. And that parallels Israel's history in breaking every single ceasefire that they've ever been involved in. But to your point, what was I doing? I was sleeping, getting ready for, this is 2:30 in the morning that time. I'm getting ready for a surgical day that would be twice as busy as a normal surgical day in the United States. And I am the busiest surgeon at my hospital. And I still would have had a day that was twice as busy. And every single case would have been as hard or harder than the hardest case I'll do on any week. And at 2:30 in the morning, the bombing started. The whole country shook. Many people have said that, and they're absolutely right. The hospital shook. My teeth shook. This hospital, the AlAqsa Martyrs Hospital, was bombed already 7 times. The bombing was on point. It was close. The windows broke. And within moments, the emergency room, and again, this is an impressively small hospital. It was the smallest, most ill-equipped hospital on October 5th of 2024.
Wow.
And it remained so that evening. And so there's one orthopedic attending besides myself, a couple of residents, and that was the entire orthopedic team. And to put this in perspective, and Feroze will put the nature, a relative nature, and explain it of what a mass casualty event meant in Boston. And he says it and gives a description that's very elegant. But a mass casualty event in this small hospital when 70 people were coming in, 80 people coming in every hour, living people, the dead ones weren't brought in. And you literally were stepping over people that you knew didn't have a chance to survive so that you could find one that could. And I distinctly remember a parentless baby reach up and grab my pant leg. And I looked down and she had no legs. And I walked away knowing that there was no hope I could save this kid. She was paper white already. She's lost probably 90% of her blood volume. And you know, you just step over people that you, beating hearts that, you know, because you have to prioritize. It's a horrible thing, but you have to prioritize and try to find somebody who have a meaningful chance to survive. Everybody ended up getting a tourniquet on 1 or 2 extremities, sometimes 4. And then you'd have to triage them when you had a chance. But the number of doctors that were there was so eviscerated, from emergency room doctors to volunteer doctors to denizen specialists. They were all scared away or murdered or imprisoned. In Israel, 350 healthcare workers are still in prison in Israel, and all of them without charges. The night of that horrible event, most people came in with a tourniquet on, a trauma tourniquet, a military style tourniquet, and we didn't have time to take them off. And so we spent the next 3 days amputating limbs on people who had tourniquets on, sometimes too long. And you'd look at them and you go, oh shit, this was a leg I could have saved, or this is an arm I could have saved, but you couldn't get to them because we didn't have the beating hearts in terms of medical care to get to them. And You don't want to take a tourniquet off of somebody and walk away from it because they could bleed to death when they, instead of an amputation. But we then amputated several limbs, dozens of limbs that potentially could have been saved had we had the personnel to do so. But we didn't. And so there's a lot of necrotic extremities distal to the tourniquet because we didn't have the people to do an appropriate triage. Functionally speaking, the hospital was so overwhelmed that we just didn't have the human capacity to deal with it. The supply capacity, notwithstanding, was non-existent as well. After that first mass casualty event, the orthopedic supplies dwindled to virtually zero. My last surgical case there was an 8-year-old boy with a broken elbow, and we used drill bits to drill holes in bone so I can put a screw in it, maybe a screw through a plate onto a bone to secure a broken fracture. This 8-year-old, I think he was, had a fracture right above the elbow. It's a horrible fracture in any country, and has to be dealt with perfectly. I did a perfect reduction on this kid. The only difference is I had no plates and I had no screws to hold it in position, so I left drill bits in the kid. The drill bits that are meant to be used on multiple patients after they're cleaned, just to drill the holes to put a screw in. But I had no screws. I had no stainless steel wires. I had no plates. I had no twist ties, which I've used in Gaza. I've used cinch ties in Gaza that you would use on a trash bag, and things I would lose my license for in the United States. But I left drill bits in this kid, my last surgery there, and that depleted 100% of the orthopedic supplies, which necessitated me traveling down to one of the two factors that made me go back down to Nasser Hospital. The other factor was the only other orthopedic surgeon there besides me was the chief of the orthopedic department. And granted, there were residents there too, a couple of good residents. But the chief of the orthopedic department was ordered to leave to a tent because his wife was a UN worker, and because even though she hasn't touched a patient in 9 months, because the excuse was because you're a UN worker, you must evacuate your house. This is your address. This is an aerial photograph of your house.
Oh
We'll
my
bomb it.
gosh.
Yeah, we'll bomb it if you don't leave and go to the coast, to the Molasi, I think I pronounced that right, where he now lives in a tent with 49 other people, and a tent built for 20 people with one toilet. And so, but that was just an excuse to eviscerate the ability to care for other injured workers, knowing he was the only other orthopod there besides me. So that left that hospital without any ability to do any extremity surgery, which is, a leading cause of morbidity in Gaza. Functionally made two remaining hospitals that can fix an orthopedic problem. There was already only one that can handle a head injury.
Um, Listening to this and these stories, it is so important for people to hear this and understand and grasp, like understand what is truly happening in Gaza. We see the videos, we see, but to hear the stories, I mean, the story that you mentioned about that little girl who lost her legs and you knew that there's no chance of saving her, and knowing that the only way that you have to pick and choose who you think you can help make it just because there's not enough hands and doctors. I mean, this is a horrific uh recount that we're listening to. And Dr. Sidhwa, I'm going to give you the floor as well. If you can just switch your camera because you're on sideways, so kind of
Yeah,
flip it.
I can't. Sorry,
It's
my
not
my phone
working.
my phone's no,
Okay.
it'll work. But my phone's gonna die. Otherwise, I got to plug it in.
Oh,
The
okay.
or here I can just hold it. It's fine.
Oh, you're good. It's okay.
No, it's all good. The so yeah, so Mark mentioned the that the yeah, when the bombs started falling on the 18th, yeah, like Mark said, it was 2:30 in the morning, and the one of the bombs hit close enough that it actually blew the door to our sleeping quarters open, and slammed into the cabinet behind it, and made this crazy noise. That was what woke all of us up. And so we went down. to the ER, for about a second. We just listened and realized how dramatic the bombing was. Then we went down to the emergency room and took it from there. So yeah, the scale of what happened just on that day. This is just one day. I just want people to keep in mind this kind of atrocity level keeps happening day after day after day. Maybe a little bit heavier on Monday, lighter on Tuesday, heavier on Wednesday, lighter on Thursday, but it's continuous. Um, just on that day, Nasser Medical Complex, which has about 450 beds and had about, I think, 5 or 6 surgeons available and 6 operating rooms. Just on that day, we saw 221 patients. All of the level 1 trauma centers in Boston combined, that's 6 different gigantic hospitals with 4,000 beds and about 400 surgeons and I think 250 operating rooms total, something like that. Altogether, they saw 129 patients on the day of the Boston Marathon bombing. So 129 patients for all of the most advanced hospitals in Boston combined versus 221 patients for this besieged, starved hospital of 450 beds, half of which are tents, incidentally, that the World Health Organization just set up, with 6 ORs and 5 or 6 surgeons in the middle of the Gaza Strip. And you can imagine that, the level of need to the level of resources that was available is I doubt there's ever been a hospital under such duress. Um, it was just kind of incredible to see. I think everybody knows. Uh, I think probably everybody has seen on Instagram and other things the degree and the severity of the wounds that the weapons that we in the United States are sending the Israelis to use on these helpless people. How dramatic the wounds are, how severe they are. Like Mark said, they do rip people's legs off. I still remember actually there was a man. He was probably 250 pounds when he was alive. He was one of the last patients I saw before leaving Gaza, if I'm remembering correctly. But big guy, real big legs, built like a football player, probably in his 40s. And he was brought in with both of his legs completely amputated. He had nothing just below the hip on both legs. And actually, I ended up seeing the video of him being extracted from the rubble. He was buried like up to his waist in rubble. The rubble was removed, and then when they pulled him out of it, of course he was already dead. But they pulled him out of it, and everyone just, oh my God, his legs are just staying down there. These are these weapons that we're providing to be dropped on tents and flimsy concrete structures that can barely withstand the wind blowing are just incredible. There's no justification for it.
Goodness. Thank you for that, Dr. Sidhwa. And then, this kind of goes to them justifying why they are attacking the hospital. Because we hear this claim, and I remember we had another Dr. Mimi Sayed, she was with us earlier, and we asked her this question, but we hear this claim that the hospitals are being used by, Hamas as a base. And after being there, what would your response be to that?
Oh, it's just total nonsense. I mean, not only did I never see anybody militarize a hospital in Gaza, Mark, I'm pretty sure you didn't either. But not it's important to recognize it doesn't like we're just two people, and we're not from the culture, right? We don't. Neither one of us speaks Arabic. Neither one of us knows the culture very well. So maybe it was hidden from us. Okay, fine. What about the other 97 healthcare workers who signed our letter to President Biden, most of whom are of Arab descent? Who speak Arabic just fine, and all of whom are Americans. They all live here, they all work here. Not one of them has any sympathy for Hamas. Why didn't they see it? Why is it that not a single one of the 100,000 people who are thought to have fled Gaza has said, "Oh, by the way, I just want to let you know Hamas is hiding under all the hospitals. It's totally true what the Israelis are saying." Not a single person. This is ridiculous. These claims are. If anybody wants the long details, please just reach out to me. I'm very happy to provide you with like 25 years of worth of evidence that Hamas is not hiding in hospitals. And furthermore, I just want to point out one thing. The second that journalists are actually able to investigate these claims, they fall apart instantly. Israel, I don't know if anybody even remembers this now, but when Israel was getting ready to bomb Lebanon, I think it was just before the pager attack in Lebanon. They claimed that one of the biggest hospitals in Beirut, which is a hospital that's operated by Hezbollah. It's a charitable hospital. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
military hospital, but it's operated by Hezbollah. They claimed, I don't know if anybody even remembers this because it was so bonkers
It
at
was
the
like
time.
under the
They
in the
cl-
bunkers, right?
they claimed that there was gold and
Yeah.
bonds and cash being stored under the hospital, and that was why they were going to bomb it. Now, leaving aside that gold being stored under a hospital is not a reason to bomb a hospital. That's completely nuts. Like there's no possible way that that could be justifiable. But the BBC, because it's Lebanon, it's not Gaza. Like in Gaza, the journalists are the Israelis just simply bar journalists from going there, and nobody listens to what Palestinian journalists say. No, nobody in the West. But then in Lebanon, the BBC was there, so they just went to the hospital and said, can we look around?" They said, "Yeah, here are all the keys. Go wherever you want." Of course, there was nothing there because who in their right mind would store gold under a hospital? It's not even a smart idea. Like you can say anything you want about Hezbollah; they're not a bunch of idiots. These claims fall apart on the most minimal inspection, and that's the whole reason that they're not allowed to be inspected in the first place.
Absolutely. And I don't know if Dr. Perlmutter, you wanted to add on that, but I will give you also a chance to respond.
Yeah, that Israel has a playbook. And one of the playbooks is when they destroy a hospital or a mosque or a school or a clinic or a sewage treatment station. Hamas is hiding there. It just gives them justification to destroy infrastructure, and then they bar Al Jazeera, they bar all free press from Gaza, but even investigative agencies from Israel themselves that would hold them accountable. Um, it's total bullshit, and it's part of their playbook and has been for several decades. And yet, every time they bring it up, as Feroze said, it's been thoroughly disproved. Um, in America, legacy media is slow on the pickup. The Times um, was very quick to report that there were Hamas tunnels underneath of Al Shifa Hospital, and very slow to reveal the evidence that there in fact was never such findings. Um, so our legacy media is complicit in advancing that incorrect and false narrative that just promulgates the lies that Netanyahu wants to advance. It's not any different than confabulating the symmetry between Judaism and Zionism. The more baloney comments that they throw at an uneducated community, the less likely they are to protest it. So it's total baloney. It always has been.
Yep.
And
And
they're going
now,
to and they'll do it again. You'll see
mhm.
when Nasser Medical Complex gets leveled, they're going to insist that there were Hamas underground. And in reality, the only thing that we found underground at the Nasser Medical Complex was a mass grave with children buried alive with their hands tied behind their backs.
Wow. T- Um, I want everybody to just listen to what he just said. That is what they found under the hospital, a mass grave with children.
460 plus bodies buried by Israel in a mass grave when they controlled Nasser Hospital. And in fact, I personally interviewed an eyewitness to somebody who gave us a written testimony to several other doctors, including a physician from Dublin, a surgeon from Dublin, who's also a lawyer, who orchestrated the questioning, who said he personally saw a bulldozer loaded with dirt push two kids and an adult man into the grave, and then heard the sounds of their cries muffle as the dirt was pulled on top of them. This is on hospital property.
Oh my goodness. And we're going to see more and more of this. We'll be, as you guys are listening now, that Israel is planning to take over all of Gaza and completely occupy it. Um, And you touched on this earlier, Dr. Perlmutter, and I'm going to kind of just swing back to this, and then that way Dr. Sidhwa could also respond about, while you were there, Israel imposed the blockade on all humanitarian aid and medical supplies coming into Gaza. What items were you running out of while you were there, and what did you do to compensate for supplies that you didn't have?
Well, first of all, it didn't happen when we were there. It never stopped from the year before when we left. Um, I told you on your last broadcast that I was on that when we left through Rafah, through a still open border, there was, in terms of numbers, enough 18-wheeler trucks, tractor trailers loaded with food and water and medical supplies, enough tractor trailers to surround Gaza 3 times. And that's just through the Rafah crossing, one of many crossings. And that was when the border was open. Rafah closed soon after that. And then the aid wasn't allowed in. Indeed, when the first time I went in, I took 700 pounds of titanium implants. Now, titanium's awfully darn light. 700 pounds is a lot of implants. And I haven't put in the United States, I haven't placed 700 pounds of titanium implants in my entire 30-year career. And it goes a long way, but it was gone in the first week a year ago. This year, I had very expensive micro instruments that I took with me. Israel confiscated them. I was allowed to bring in 1 kilogram of food, and so I did. Only 1 kilogram, just a couple of pounds. I'm not allowed to bring in any medicines, not a box of Band-Aids, no antibiotics. I tried, but they were confiscated. And so that regulation has been in for over half a year. And then, of course, the border's been closed for a half a year for all medical supplies, not just when we got there. So I'm a surgeon that's not allowed to bring in suture. I'm not allowed to bring in esoteric instruments that enable me to do what I do. I can't bring in dressings. I can't bring in antibiotics. I can't bring in pain medicine. There's no anesthesia. I amputated an arm on a little girl without any anesthesia. The anesthesiologist just sang to her. That was her anesthesia. He sang to her. It was mesmerizing how she tolerated it until she fainted. But that's because we can't bring in supplies. This has been part of the orchestration. Initially claiming that they were dual use, that they could somehow be used as a weapon. My micro instruments can't be used as a weapon. My suture can't be used as a weapon. My sutures are so small you can't even see them with your naked eye. They're hardly going to strangle an Israeli soldier. It's just another way of killing another Palestinian kid. And then there's starvation. Famine is another thing, and Feroze can address that as well. When I was there, I bought a can of tuna fish for $40. The day I left, I went to buy some for the medical students I left behind, and it was $90. And I couldn't afford it. The reason why I couldn't afford it is because we were only allowed to bring in $280 in mixed
Wow.
currency. We
So
couldn't
they
even.
also you had a limit about on how much money you were also allowed to bring with you.
Absolutely. $280 was the cost of getting in and getting out, assuming that you bought no food when you were there. So, it's $100 each way just to get in and get out, with various bus fares and security fees and things like that, visas. And so they came up with that amount only because they knew what our expenses were. It was specifically designed to block me from donating money or buying food or things on the market. 2 tomatoes were $3 for a population that makes an average of 50 cents a day. The can of tuna fish was insanely expensive. No protein is affordable. And most people ate one meal a day. That was iftar. One meal a day, regardless of their age, regardless of their health. Malnutrition and famine were widespread when we were there. And that translated into a greater number of infections, a greater number of deaths. It would in any country.
And now we know that it's been 70 days since anything has come in. Food, humanitarian aid, nothing has entered Gaza. Go ahead, Dr. Sidhwa, if you wanted to also answer.
Yeah, I think the question was about the what was available in the hospitals. I don't have anything more to say than what Mark did. It's just yeah, the blockade of Gaza, of course, like Mark said, Gaza's never been, not since 2004, hasn't been allowed to have normal commerce with the outside world. But there is there had been some humanitarian aid brought in between January 19th of this year when the ceasefire was signed, or when it went into effect. I guess it was signed on January 15th, and March 18th. So basically, exactly 2 months. But during that time, it's not like Gaza was just open for business like a normal place. It was it was still incredibly restricted. The Israelis slow tracked everything. The one thing people should remember is that the ceasefire agreement that the Israelis signed and that the U.S. is a sworn guarantor of. It's available online. You can go to the Times of Israel and read it in English. And that agreement very explicitly said that there are a certain number of trucks that will need to be allowed in. There's a certain amount of fuel that will need to be allowed in. A certain amount of it needs to be designated for the north of Gaza. That Israel is to facilitate these movements, obviously, and that also tens and tens of thousands of shelters, both tents and mobile homes, were to be brought in. Almost none of that actually happened. It was kind of incredible. They just said no. They just, oh no, why would we do that? Hamas. It's important to remember Hamas released every hostage on time. There was one misidentification of a person that as soon as Hamas was made aware of it, they corrected and they sent, because the person was dead. They sent back the correct body. That was it. That was the only screw up on Hamas's part. Then the Israelis started saying, "Oh, they're breaking the ceasefire by having these big release ceremonies where Israeli captors are, to be fair, I think quite illegitimately paraded about and made, they saying kind of bizarre things about their captors being so good to them and things like that, which I'm sure they didn't believe. It was all propaganda, but that's kind of normal in war. That's not that surprising. Nobody actually asked how Palestinian, because remember, there was a hostage exchange going on. The Palestinians were releasing Israeli hostages and the Israelis were releasing Palestinian hostages. No one actually, it's barely covered in the press. If when an Israeli hostage was released and they had lost weight, which of course all of them had because they were living in pretty tough conditions, certainly not eating any more than anybody else was. That was banner. Oh, look, he looks like he came out of Auschwitz. Everyone's losing their minds. 80%, 80% of prisoners who were released during that time from the Palestinian prisoners who were released had scabies. Scabies is such a rare disease in any place that has soap and water that if you see someone in the United States with it, you actually alert people that they're being abused. Okay, like that's how scabies. It's one of these infections of the skin that's just horrendous. This is all just from malnutrition, overcrowding, and severe mistreatment in prison. Just absolutely outrageous behavior, But again, it shows you who people in the West think are human beings and who are not.
Um, so I know, Dr. Sidhwa, you contacted the U.S. Embassy while you were there. What prompted you to contact the U.S. Embassy, and how did they respond to your request for protection?
I didn't contact them at all, actually. I didn't even bother telling the U.S. Embassy I was going because they're a joke. The U.S. So on March 23rd, I think this is what you're referring to. On March 23rd, 5 days after the ceasefire had been broken, the Nasser Medical Complex was bombed directly. One of my patients was killed, and I was actually almost killed because I was walking to his room to change his bandages for the last time. And so I just put up what do you call it? A post on X, a tweet. And I just said that I just said what had happened, just like I just told you. And that, for a tweet about Gaza, I guess it went viral. And I don't remember if it was that day or the next day now. I can't remember. I got a call from a number in Israel, and I said, it's weird. Maybe it's a reporter. Let me pick it up. So I picked it up, and it was a lady from the embassy. And she said, "Oh, we saw your tweet. We wanted to make sure you're okay." And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm fine." I really wish I'd recorded this because it was such. I had a sense that I should have just done it, but I really wish I'd recorded it. She said, "We wanted to make sure that you're okay." And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thankfully, this time I just happened to not have been blown up in that room. Maybe you could call the Israelis and ask them not to bomb this hospital again." And I swear to God, her response was, "Oh, sorry, that's not our role. Sorry, thanks, bye." It's like, what was the point of this? What was the point of this phone? This is precisely why I had no contact with the embassy because they're ridiculous. The U.S. Embassy's job in Israel is hardly to help American citizens stay safe there. It's just pretty outrageous, you know. It just kind of illustrates, you know, when people say that we're doing this or that to keep you safe, meaning you Americans. You're not the Americans they're trying to keep safe. All of this is to protect American power and prestige. You know, corporate profits, profits from arms manufacturers. It's not. It has nothing to do with keeping American human beings safe. It has to do with mostly keeping American corporations in power and well fed. So, you know, it's
So they
pretty
just said it
remarkable.
wasn't their role to really step in and do anything to help you.
Yeah, which is kind of funny. I mean, you know, you kind of wonder what is the role of an embassy
Yeah.
if it's not to help you citizens of your own country communicate with the government of that foreign country. That's what every other embassy does, but not Israel's. Let me say it more clearly. Not the U.S. embassy in Israel. It has
Mm.
some other role, which for anybody who's actually familiar with American embassies in the Middle East, that may not be so surprising.
Yeah, and Dr. Perlmutter, what what was your reaction to hearing how they responded to in the call with Dr. Sidhwa?
Not surprised at all. A year ago, when we were there, and our hospital got hurt, this was the European Gaza hospital when Feroze and I were working there together. The hospital got bombed right outside of the walls, and ceiling tiles came down, windows gotten broken, and it was right after the World Central Kitchen vans were bombed and the healthcare workers murdered deliberately. And so I emailed the American embassies, both. There's one in Tel Aviv and one in Jerusalem. I've got returned automatic responses back from both and did not receive a telephone call or an email back from either one of them at any time. I called Chuck Schumer's office a year ago when I was in Gaza. I spoke to his secretary, told him what was going on. This is the day after he berated Bibi Netanyahu on the Senate floor. I figured I had another fellow Jewish heritage person that would listen to me, and no return communication at all. And then further communications to them went unanswered, including emails. While I was there this trip, I communicated with a Republican Southern California congressman named Darrell Issa, who shared with me his cell phone number based on previous conversations that we had when I was still in the United States. And he reached out to me after a Doctors Against Genocide talk that I spoke at right after the election. And he had asked me to meet him in D.C. Prior to me going to Gaza, and I went to D.C. to meet with him, and he blew me off and went to Miami. I'm in his office when I finally got a text saying he's in Miami. So I incessantly texted him photographs of dead babies from Gaza, and saying, and I told him, because now I've already decided that he's a piece of shit morally. And he was bragging about his 100% APAC score prior to this, that he goes to Israel twice a year, and he's very proud of his support from them and the money he gets from them to ensure his prolonged reelection. And so I sent him a picture of a dead baby that was still warm, and I said to him, "Your ROI, return on investment, to AIPAC is pretty good tonight, isn't it? I said, one future Hamas fighter that's not going to fight, even though this was a little girl. And I kept sending him pictures just like that, and eventually he responded. But it was a typical political aloof response that we will get together and collectively work on a solution. Yeah. And so, and again, we had a dialect that was by his stimulus, not mine. I didn't pry to get his personal cell phone number. He offered it to me and called me on mine. That's how I got it. So our government is in the pocket of AIPAC and other interests, including the Christian Zionists, and as long as the institutions that they wish to support are financially structured to receive that support, the hope of a politician, the hope of an embassy helping us is nil. We knew we were on our own when we went there.
Well, you have all of us, and we are all with you, and we're all so proud of both you and Dr. Sidhwa. My final two questions is, and I believe you mentioned the story, and forgive me if I'm mistaken, but there was one story of a child who had a bullet wound that entered, and then when it was from the back, your entire hand went into, like, was a hole. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Perlmutter.
One of the things that nobody wants to hear about a dead baby. I tried to share a story with U.S. legacy media, thinking that, oh my God, even though these are the children of quote unquote terrorists, maybe Americans will wake up if they hear the truth about how babies are dying. Most Americans, including myself, prior to going there, the other gentleman who's talking tonight, what I call, I tease and call him my professor. He taught me that the population was 50% children. And I didn't realize that until within 24 hours of getting there, when we saw that 90% of our patients were children. They just don't take a bombing as well as an adult. But the things that we saw and what Feroze had documented in his scholarly New York Times full-page Sunday article was that 83% of the American doctors that were there saw a child that was shot in either the head or the chest. Now, not 83% of doctors work in an ER. We had infectious disease doctors. We had nurses that work on the floor. We had wound care specialists. But so to see a child who's shot, you'd have to be in the emergency room. So that's probably 100% of the doctors who actually would position themselves in an emergency room saw a child that was shot in the head or chest. And that's in every clinic over a year in Gaza. It's not just one isolated event where one rogue soldier could have done it. It was all over the Gaza Strip in every clinic. Every doctor practically every doctor, I should say, who could have seen a child saw one shot in the head or chest. I saw two children back to back, same ER triage. I saw two children that were shot in both the head and chest. And a high velocity bullet wound classically has a small entrance hole and a huge exit hole. And at least for a classic sniper rifle bullet. And there's a spectrum of other wounds that we could talk about from different weapons, but from a sniper rifle, it's a small entrance hole and a large exit hole because of the kinetic energy and the concussion and the pressure wave that it induces. And neither kid had any organs in their chest. Neither kid had any skeleton in his back. It was just something. These are 6 to 8 year old kids. You could put a football in their back. When I went to roll them over just to do a trauma assay, my hand fell into the cavity of their chest. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And to have it twice in a row, and then to see their brains pour out of their head from the second shot, was definitive. They had to have been shot twice, and the bullet entrance holes were perfectly on the side of the temple, and perfectly where I would put my stethoscope. Not accidental hits. Nobody gets shot twice by mistake.
Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter. And Dr. Sidhwa, if you can tell us about the 16-year-old patient that you saw and helped the night that the hospital was attacked.
Yeah, yeah, his name was Ibrahim. So he was a 16-year-old kid. He came in after his tent was bombed on March 18th and of this year, and he had some injuries to his colon. I repaired those. I gave him a colostomy, and on the night of March 23rd, he was actually ready to go home. I still regret that I didn't just discharge him in the middle of the night, which normally you don't do that, so I didn't. But he was recovering well. Somehow he got away without an infection, without even though he's quite malnourished. But he was a nice kid actually. He was one of those kids that kind of like to tell you what you weren't expecting to hear. So I still remember the first day I went to examine him after his operation. It's only like 12 hours after I did his case. I was like, "Feel jaw, like does your belly hurt when I'm pressing on it?" And he just goes, "No." It's like, no, your belly definitely hurts, buddy. You're just telling me it doesn't. But that was just his way. He was just a sweet kid, cantankerous teenager. And actually, I learned more about him after he died. He had been, when I met his dad, I was pretty sure that people were mistranslating and that it was actually his grandpa, because the man was so much older than a 16-year-old boy's dad should be. And I was just thinking, why? But somebody eventually told me actually he's a twin. Ibrahim was a twin, and born from in vitro fertilization. So his family had been trying for almost 2 decades to have kids. His twin had been killed at the beginning of the war, and so that was why his dad was just kind of hovering over him the entire time he was there. I thought it was a little bit unusual for a 16-year-old boy in that culture to be doted on, especially by his dad. And so anyway, so on the 23rd, he was ready to go home, and I took him, uh, or sorry, I went. It was about 9 o'clock at night. We had just had iftar, and I was going to go downstairs and change his bandages. We lived on the fourth floor, and the men's surgical ward was on the second floor. So I was going down there, and somebody pulled me into the ICU and just said, "Can you look at this person over here that's bleeding? He's new. He was just transferred here. We're worried he's going to bleed to death." And they were right. It was another 16-year-old boy, this one named Mohammed. And he had had an operation at an outside hospital. They hadn't done the operation properly, so he needed to go back to the operating room, which was a simple fix. It wasn't a big deal. So I worked him up for maybe 10, 12 minutes, something like that. And then I said, "Okay, you guys," meaning the ICU doctors, "you talk to the operating room. I'm going to go change Ibrahim's bandages, and then I'm going to come back. And by that time, this kid will be in the operating room and we'll get his case done." And as I walked out of the ICU, so now all I had to do was go down 2 floors, and I would have been in Ibrahim's room. As I walked out of the ICU, Ibrahim's room exploded. The Israelis fired a missile at it, probably from a drone. They were very proud of it. They didn't try to even pretend. Now that Biden's not the president, you don't have to pretend that you care about international law. And that was it. The Israelis killed Ibrahim, and they killed the person that they were aiming at, which was the person that they claimed was Hamas's prime minister, who had been injured in it. Now, the Israelis claimed he had been in the hospital for weeks planning terrorist attacks. And that raises two questions. Number one, why didn't I ever see him doing that? That's very strange. We all walked around the hospital freely. Everybody knew me as the weird American that likes to take pictures of everything, who isn't Arab, who isn't Muslim, so I'm definitely an outsider. Everybody, literally, all the hospital staff knew that within 5 minutes. In fact, most of the hospital staff actually recognized me from Instagram. So they knew full well I wasn't somebody who could be trusted to keep Hamas secrets if that was the plan. And nevertheless, there were no locked doors. Nobody ever tried to keep me from going anywhere. And I was on the surgical ward 2 or 3 times a day. Secondly, this guy was in literally the most exposed room in the entire in the entire ward. Any other room, it would have been impossible to just bomb from the air. But he, just because of the nature of the hospital and the setup of the buildings there, but he was in literally the one room that could be accurately targeted by a missile strike. Also, that room had a staircase right outside of it that goes to the outside of the hospital. So a special forces team could have certainly been sent in to kill him. He's like, it was literally the least secure place to plan terrorist attacks from in all of the Gaza Strip. So that's number two. But number three, why would he? If it was March 23rd, right? Up until March 18th, there was a ceasefire. Why would he? Why would he have been hiding in the hospital for weeks during a ceasefire? That is just completely idiotic. The whole thing was bonkers to begin with. The reality of it is that he was admitted to the hospital a few hours before he was killed. And the reason he and Ibrahim were put into the same room is because they're from the same extended family. Ibrahim was his distant cousin. People later told me. Obviously, I have no way of knowing their family tree. So this was this attack on the hospital was a crime in several different ways. Firstly, it's just even if you think that a politician is a legitimate military target, which most people don't. Most people call that assassinating somebody. But even if you think a Hamas politician is a legitimate military target, fine. That means the laws of war apply. That's the rule set we're working under at that point. Well, in that case, it was legitimate to target him on March 18th or 19th. But once he's injured, it's no longer legitimate to target him, especially once he's injured and not participating in combat anymore. That's international law dating back to 1864. Furthermore, that's also U.S. and Israeli Army codes. It's not just international law. Secondly, it was a crime to attack a hospital at all, right? Like there are actually very specific steps that a belligerent has to take under international law if they want to attack a hospital. Because can hospitals be militarized in theory? Yeah, sure they can. Of course they can. There's no theoretical reason that you couldn't make something that looks like a hospital from the outside be a military base on the inside. But the fact of the matter is it's not happening. I see people putting up kind of sarcastic comments. It's completely ridiculous. There is no evidence for this whatsoever. Anybody is very welcome to email me. I'm very happy to look at any evidence they have for it. I assure you, I've looked at this very extensively. There is no evidence whatsoever that Hamas is using hospitals as planning grounds, as staging grounds, is militarizing them in any way. And furthermore, just kind of think about it for a second. Benjamin Netanyahu had his prostate removed in late December of last year. So I think it was December 27th, something like that. And he was in the hospital for 4 days. Now, it was a civilian hospital in Jerusalem. I forget the name of it, but it was a civilian hospital, a big 1,000 bed facility. Excellent job. I've been there. I just can't remember the name. It was an excellent tertiary care facility, and actually a quaternary care facility in Jerusalem. High level hospital. And by all accounts, by every account, he militarized the hospital while he was there. He had his prostate removed. The next day, when he was recovered from anesthesia, he was having meetings with his generals. He was having, in other words, he was running the war effort from his hospital room. Well, that's militarization of the hospital. But still, does anyone in their right mind think that Hamas can just go kill him in his hospital bed? That's crazy. The sick are a protected class of people under international humanitarian law.
Yeah,
Even
and
if
it was the
Hamas didn't.
Hadassah medical hospital
It could
center.
be. I honestly don't know, but it's a massive hospital in Jerusalem. Beautiful place. The wherever he has, it doesn't matter. Sick people who are in a hospital, are a protected class of people under international humanitarian law. You don't just get to blow people up in hospitals because you don't like them. The law doesn't stop applying to people just because you say they're really, really, really bad. Like there's somebody who keeps writing October 777 in the comments. Okay, yeah, October 7th happened, and it was quite brutal. No one claims otherwise, or no one sensible claims otherwise. But what does that have to do with blowing up a hospital on March 23rd of 2025? Nothing.
Nothing.
Anyone who isn't crazy can see that.
Thank
And
you.
also,
Mhm. Go ahead,
also,
Dr. Mo.
if I can add to that, it's not just hospitals. Israel's targeting other protected facilities that,
Oh yeah.
and keep in mind, they're a signature to the Geneva Convention and have been so since 1950. Also protected in Article 4 of the Geneva Convention are embassies and safe houses. And when I was at the AlAqsa medical complex, the UN was targeted. And they found fragments of 120 millimeter smoothbore shell there, and certainly inside the flesh of a UN worker whose leg got amputated. And so why would they be attacking UN workers and then advance this baloney argument that this highly skilled set of people whose job it is to remove unexploded ordnance so that the civilians could be protected, why would they then find an unexploded shell and bring it back into their bedrooms only to watch it detonate and blow off their own legs? And that's baloney. The fact that they have been targeting the UN, in particularly UNRWA, forever has been it. And that's because UNRWA's mandate, which is from the beginning since the Nakba, is to exist until there's a political solution. So the best way to silence the UN and its facilities, including UNRWA, is to declare them terrorist organizations and to treat them like terrorists by bombing them, from the Merkava tank, which can hit a moving vehicle at 70 miles an hour from 5 miles away. So there's no mistake that this very accurate tank shot a very accurate shell and hit its intended target, which were French UN workers. The same way they deliberately targeted the World Central Kitchen vans. 2 of them struck simultaneously 5 or so kilometers apart, each moving 70 miles an hour. This is the deliberate assassination of international aid workers.
Yeah, at the International Court of Justice just a few days ago, or actually more, maybe 3 weeks ago now, one of the lines of argument of this was during the ICJ had a hearing specifically about whether or not Israel needs to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. Kind of a wild thing to have to discuss. Excuse me. And during that hearing, one of the things that, forget the guy's name, I can't pronounce it anyway. One of the things that the people arguing in favor that yes, Israel does have to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. One of the things he pointed out to the justices is that the Israelis, and he should have said the U.S. and Israel, but politics being what it is, the Israelis are undermining and destroying literally all of international humanitarian law in Gaza. Every single aspect of it. And he's not wrong about that. In fact, he's not even the first person to point it out. Francesca Albanese, who gets all sorts of nonsense online, a very smart lady, very dedicated. She pointed out that not only Israel isn't only destroying international law, but is actually weaponizing its features. So, like Mark claimed, every single individual strike, the Israelis in their daily field reports, they claim there was a Hamas terrorist there. Okay, now the UN pretends that this is a serious thing. And they actually say, oh, well, we ought to go investigate. The Israelis say you can't go in and investigate. Oh, well, how can we possibly come up with a conclusion now? It's a weaponization of the idea of international law. And furthermore, it's a perversion of a lot of really simple, basic things that, again, any sensible person can see, think better be preserved. This is not a nonviolent world we live in. Our Western countries fight a lot of wars. And you probably don't want these things like the distinction between civilians and combatants to be undermined. So one of the ways that Israel has started to do this, and again, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting in certain ways. One of the ways they started to do this is by saying that because Hamas presents some sort of unique threat to Israel, because of that, it's acceptable to kill hundreds of people in the pursuit of a single Hamas commander or a single Hamas militant. This is completely ridiculous for a few reasons. Number one, Israel just decides who is a Hamas commander. Like I seriously doubt Ismail Barhoum even knew he was the prime minister of Gaza. There's actually a Wall Street Journal article about how he probably didn't and how nobody in Gaza knew that he was the prime minister of Gaza. Because his predecessor had been assassinated 5 days earlier. How exactly would he even learned about this? And in the middle of this massive bombing campaign. So the undermining of the distinction between combatants and civilians, also incidentally, that's something Hamas does. We shouldn't pretend that it's just something Israel does. Like, for example, when Hamas says that all Israeli males of military age are are combatants. Well, no, that's all obviously not a legitimate way of interpreting international law. But nevertheless, Hamas has no power over the world. The United States and Israel have power over the world. And if we're gonna keep going down this road, it's a very dangerous place that we're gonna end up in. We're gonna end up back in a place where war has no rules, and with the technology that the world has now for killing each other. Um, it's a very serious problem, and it could very easily lead to the end of the human species. To be perfectly honest.
And the ability to segue into how it affects not just Palestinians, but in the United States, it's now illegal for me to communicate with Professor Khan, the head of the International Criminal Court. He has been criminalized for communication. If I send him an email, I could be arrested. I live within 100 miles of a port, which is an airport. Um, uh, in the United States, the Border Patrol can knock on my door at any time without a warrant because I live within 100 miles of a port and take me custody. And I could be accused of being a Hamas sympathizer and be accused of war crimes. Um, and only because, or whatever crimes, uh, but but our vulnerability is increasing in ways that we may not even know because of the influence of Zionists on our politicians, which make it now illegal for me to communicate with the directorship of the ICC. I could communicate with the ICC indirectly, but I can't communicate with the person who had sent me an email previously. I can't return that email for fear of personal prosecution, which would happen. I'm not under the pretense that my emails aren't being listened to. I know my phone was destroyed when I came back in through border control. Um, yeah, and I'm sure there's nothing protected in any avenue of communication.
Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Sidhwa. I'm going to open the questions now to the panelists. Everything that you guys have shared tonight has been very eye-opening. These stories, we will be able to remember them. We'll be able to remember Ibrahim, Dr. Sidhwa, and we'll never forget him. Go ahead. We'll start with Linda and we'll go down the panel.
Hi, Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Sidhwa. Welcome back. It's good to see you again. I'd like to start off by thanking you for having the courage to return to Gaza and to look after our people. I have two questions. My first question is, do you find it coincidental that Nasser was targeted shortly after your on-air interview? Or do you believe that this was deliberate targeting?
I don't think the Israelis were aiming for us at all. I think they were aiming for the guy that they killed, Ismail Barhoum. I
Okay.
don't think it had. I don't think it had anything to do with it. Just to be clear, if the Israelis wanted to kill Mark or me, they would have no difficulty doing so, and they know full well that the U.S. wouldn't give a damn. So it's. I don't think there's any. If the Israelis wanted to kill me, they would have just waited until I was in the room. If they wanted to kill me, they could have done so at any time that I was on the. The fourth floor. When we're there, we're just in a hospital. We're not protected by anything. We're not hermetically sealed off. We're not like scurrying around in protected places or something. We're just walking around. They have drones literally everywhere. They could kill anybody at any time that they want to, including us. If they wanted to kill us, they would have just done it.
I
And,
had to
and
ask, I'm sorry, go ahead, doctor.
I was going to say there's spies there too.
Right? Yeah.
An orthopedic surgeon friend of mine there, the only pediatric orthopedic surgeon in the country, was taken prisoner, and he was beaten every time in Israel. He was beaten every time he asked to speak to his lawyer. He was beaten 3 times harder every time he spoke to his lawyer. He was shown a photograph of his wife at street level that had a time and date stamp on it the day before and said, "We will bring her in front of you and gang rape her if you don't admit that you're Hamas and tell us where they're hiding." He's a surgeon. They pulled him out of the operating room. They used vice grips to crush all of his fingertips. I've seen his fingertips. I've seen the x-rays. I saw his hand under an x-ray machine and saw that they were broken. And that's what started the conversation. And Then they showed him another timestamp picture of his house and said, this drone that took this picture will send a missile through your kid's house bedroom window and incinerate them if you don't tell us where the Hamas is hiding. And so, the level of intimidation is huge. So they have spies there. And keep in mind that the fellow who was killed by the drone strike, they tracked his turned off cell phone. If you have an eSIM card in your cell phone, your phone is never off, even if it's powered off. It's always broadcasting its electronic signal. And they sent that drone missile probably right down the throat of his eSIM phone's signal. And so they know where we're at. And I'm not under the pretense that the house I live in is protected in the United States. Truly, what Feroze said is true. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead.
I had to ask because there was speculation. I was actually on Sidhwa live and a journalist was reporting live from the ground, and we were told that it was an assassination, but there was speculation that you all were targeted as well. So thank you. My second question is relating to the hospital system on the brink of collapse within the next 48 hours. And I believe that the Khan Yunis municipality stated that about 700,000 displaced people are at risk of a slow unalivement at the moment. I was wondering if you've been in touch with any of your colleagues. Is there a plan set in motion? And if you can share anything about that.
Yesterday, I spoke to the chief nursing officer, one of the administrators at the Nasser medical complex. Feroze and I had coffee at his house. In his house, he had a couple bags of flour that was stored. That's gone. He told me that he and his family have not eaten in 3 days. And the starvation alone is destroying the caregivers, let alone the patients. Again, remember I said I left one hospital because they had no further x-rays capability. They had no drills. They had no implants. And without implants, an orthopedist is a fish out of water, except for lacerations. But I had no suture either. I was closing incisions with Egyptian suture that expired in 2015, and it would break in your hands. The Egyptian manufactured suture, and no dig on Egyptians, but it was 10-year-old suture. And that would fall, American suture would fall apart after 10 years. So the hospitals were already on the brink of catastrophe. I can't imagine any part of the medical system surviving as long as it has. Any more mass casualty events at any remaining hospital has to consume every single remaining supply. In fact, at the AlAqsa medical complex, the last 10 surgeries I did there, I didn't have soap to wash my hands. I didn't have soap to clean a wound. I made incisions through dirt. I now used gloves over. I used tap water to wash somebody else's blood off my hands because we had no other gloves.
Yeah, the exactly like Mark's saying. I just to put maybe a clear point on it. There is no healthcare system in Gaza anymore. There are a few people running around scrounging up whatever they can to do the best they can, and God bless them. They are. I'm not even a religious person, but God bless them. They really are doing what they can. The Palestinian healthcare workers in Gaza really should get the next 10 Nobel Prizes if there's any of them left. But it's just I've worked in some pretty tough places, and so has Mark. And there's just nothing like what's being done to Gaza right now, and especially the attacks on healthcare are so outrageous, and we become numb to them. But it's just important to remember they are just so outrageously wrong. They are such a deeply inhumane thing to do, and just to be clear, they are such a deeply inhumane thing to do, but they're an even more, in my opinion, even more deeply inhumane thing to support from afar. To say if somebody wanted to say, look, the Israelis are enraged about October 7th, even though it's almost 2 years later. Okay, fine. What's our excuse? Are we enraged about October 7th still? Hardly. The fact that the United States is still supporting this, and under Biden was supporting it, and I hope people actually, I don't know if anybody saw. It was covered well by Dropsite News because I don't speak Hebrew, and I'm guessing most people on here don't either. Channel 13 News, it's an investigative news channel in Israel. They ran a major story where a whole bunch of Biden administration officials basically went to Israel to complain to the Israelis that please let us back in your good graces. Please, 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 please. It's pathetic. It was actually in the annals of diplomatic history, nobody will ever believe that this era even occurred because it's just so completely ridiculous. But they were just begging the Israelis to take them back in. And there was a very interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff in those interviews, but one of the most important ones is that I forget who it was. But somebody said, we Israelis should be thanking God that Joe Biden was the president of the United States when we started doing this, because he never once asked us for a ceasefire. What was he? What was Biden and his handlers and Kamala Harris and even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? What were they all saying they were doing constantly? The word was tirelessly, every day, tirelessly. You heard that word 1,000 times. We are tirelessly working for a ceasefire. No, turns out they weren't doing it at all. At all. It's hard to explain how dastardly that is. How unbelievably cruel and inhuman these people are that they could go about knowing what they knew. Because they know, Mark and I had a meeting with a very high level State Department person whom we probably shouldn't name. But the not cabinet level, but just below cabinet level, kind of a special appointee for humanitarian affairs in the Middle East. And she told us, or I remember I asked, this was after my New York Times article came out and after a Politico article had come out and after a whole bunch of, it's not like we're the only people that have written about this. There's plenty of other evidence everywhere. We asked her, is the case that the Biden administration, like the upper levels, like Biden, Blinken, Lloyd Austin, Brett McGurk, these people, is it that they don't know what the Israelis are doing or that they don't care? And she said, no, it's not that they don't know or they don't care. It's just that they're well aware. Like she said, every time we have a meeting, I bring up your New York Times article. And everyone goes, and? Like they know. Nobody says she's lying. Nobody says I'm lying. Nobody says Mark is lying. Nobody who has a brain is in the government, unlike some of the people here. But nobody says we're lying. It just doesn't matter. The political calculation is just not worth it to stop the Israelis from doing what they're doing. That's shocking. That tells you what kind of place we live in. So it's we can be angry at the Israelis all we want, and we should be. But it's important to remember that, and I don't think anybody here would disagree with me, but it's important to remember that we are the ones that can stop this. The Israelis have decided to do what they're going to do. They're, like Itamar Ben-Gvir was just here, and he tweeted out that he met with Republican lawmakers, and they were all happy to support his plan. And I swear to God, this is not my, I'm not embellishing this. This is exactly how he said it. His plan to bomb aid depots in Gaza to pressure Hamas, which is obviously the dumbest sentence that's ever been written. Why wouldn't it's completely ridiculous. You're not pressuring Hamas by bombing the aid depots when you've already killed tens of thousands of people. It's obviously just to keep killing people. It's just another way of murdering people.
Yeah.
And nobody even blinked an eye. It was barely reported. Itamar Ben-Gvir is a convicted terrorist. In case anybody doesn't know that, he actually was convicted of terrorism in his. Interesting. And
sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
He's a convicted terrorist. He was literally convicted of terrorism in an Israeli court in I believe it was the late 90s or early 2000s. And his party is an offshoot of the Koch Party, which is a Jewish terrorist organization still in Israel by Israeli even by Israeli standards and under Israeli law. It's and they just renamed it the Jewish Power Party. That's literally the name of it. It's Yehudit. I forget what power is in Hebrew, but the it's pretty outrageous. So these are things that we don't have to accept. By our own laws, Itamar Ben Gvir should not be allowed in the United States. By our own laws. Okay, why aren't we? It's not that hard to enforce your own laws. But these are things that this is where we kind of can see that we need to turn inward if we're going to solve this problem. It's not a problem that's happening with those dastardly Israelis over there. The problem is here in the United States with us.
And
Thank you.
we have to learn how to play three-dimensional chess like Israel's doing. We're playing checkers to their three-dimensional, four-dimensional chess. They're outpacing the intellect invested into this across the board. Jimmy Carter was free to talk about, as was Richard Nixon back in their presidencies in the 60s and 70s and 80s. That if any senator or congressman opposed what Israel's doing, they will be a one-term legislature. If any president opposed what Israel's doing, they will be a single-term president, and their party would likely flip the election. So, what he's really acknowledging is the money machine that the Zionists have placed within our government, embedded within our media, embedded within our movies, embedded within Hollywood, embedded within our local news broadcast stations, where nobody can say anything bad about Zionism without being accused of being an anti-Semite. And being accused of an anti-Semite is something that nobody really wants to do. And that crime of being an anti-Semite is held above the head of every politician, knowing that they will lose their reelection if they don't support the Zionistic ambitions of modern day Israel. So we have to learn how to educate our politicians and our genuinely Christian church leaders of the evils of Zionism as a political movement.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Sidhwa. I will go next to Ask the Doc.
Hey guys, I want to first off thank you, Taz, for hosting this live. It's a much needed live. And thank you to the doctors for being here and sharing your experience. And I definitely agree that we have to do more. And I think it unfortunately is true. I'm a physician as well, but that your voices are very powerful because you're non-Arab, non-Muslim, non-Palestinian voices. So I really, really appreciate what you guys do. My question, Linda kind of asked a similar question, but so I will reframe it a little bit. But we know that they're targeting medical professionals, right? We know that the 15 paramedics that were targeted in a mass unaliving and buried. We know that Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, I don't know if you know him, Dr. Perlmutter, but he was an orthopedic surgeon who was the chief of the El Shifa hospital.
No, it's story.
Yeah, and he was imprisoned and tortured until he died.
In prison, in prison, in custody, he died.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. So my question is, do you think that Israel is not just targeting the healthcare infrastructure, but also trying to psychologically break Gaza's medical community so that even the surviving doctors question whether to stay or even serve again?
Sure. I mean, the example I gave you of that pediatric orthopedic surgeon who was psychologically abused, breaking his fingertips is something that he survived. The threat of his wife and children being raped and incinerated was horrible. He tells me about a female IDF soldier who would put vibrators up his rectum, and he was told it was soaked in pork blood. That was only to psychologically destroy him. We're actually trying to get him counseling in the United States through telemedicine now. He's that horribly, he breaks down and cries when I speak to him. The same thing with the nursing director at the hospital, horribly abused, in prison. Feroze can tell us about a general surgeon, a young guy, probably going to be one of the premier general surgeons in Gaza if he lives through this. could stand up as a premier general surgeon in any hospital in the United States. And he was in prison for, I believe, 11 months. And all of these people are afraid to speak. They know that they have their voices recorded and voice recognition software is out there. They're told that if they talk, they'll kill their families. They're shown GPS coordinates of their homes. Everybody uses an Israeli SIM card. Israel controls the entire electromagnetic space. They can track anybody down at any time and kill them at any time. And they deliver that threat freely. They text doctors individually, and like the orthopedist that was at AlAqsa hospital. You have 5 minutes to leave your house with your wife. He had no time but to grab a change of clothing, his medical certificates, what cash and jewelry he had, and they left because they would have kept their promise. You know, the psychological trauma is the worst. The one organ that is damaged more in every single healthcare worker than any other organ is the cerebrum.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. Did you want to answer as well, Dr. Sidhwa?
Yeah, it's important to understand the attack on Gaza. It's not like Israel is conducting a reasonable war otherwise, but is also attacking Gaza's healthcare system. There's some fighting. I mean, maybe there's some component of a war, but it's kind of a sideshow, if anything. The main thing that Israel is doing in Gaza is destroying Palestinian society there. That goal has pretty much been accomplished already. I mean, there are no intact buildings in the Gaza Strip. I don't know if people understand this. It is. I mean this seriously. It is. Khan Yunis is the least damaged part of Gaza, where Mark was in Deir al-Balah, which is a little bit worse. But for the most part, we were in Khan Yunis together. Khan Yunis is the least damaged city in the Gaza Strip. I once walked from Nasser Medical Complex to Amal Hospital, which was the Palestine Red Crescent Society's home base in Khan Yunis, and I think it's a mile or a mile and a half, something like that. And I mean this exactly as I'm saying it. There is not an undamaged building between those two hospitals in that mile and a half walk. There are blocks that are literally just rubble. Most buildings are, and I don't mean like there's a bullet hole somewhere on the building if you look closely. I mean there's always a wall shorn off, or the building is just pancaked. And this is the best off city in Gaza. The entire north, all the way down through Gaza City, up until Wadi Gaza, basically just north of where Mark was in Deir al-Balah, is gone. It literally does not exist anymore. There is nothing left there of any significance. In terms of physical structures, plenty of people there. And then the south, Rafah has just been completely destroyed over the past month and a half. And it was already damaged quite badly, but it has literally been obliterated. It doesn't exist anymore. The only so I'm just sorry, it's kind of rambling, but the point is this is an attack on Palestinian society as a whole in Gaza, and part of destroying any society in this way is destroying its intelligentsia as well. It's upper class in terms of economics, but also in terms of thought. And doctors are a big part of that. Physicians are extremely respected in Palestinian society, like in most societies. And because of that, it's just necessary. If you're gonna kill off the entire intelligentsia of a society, you have to include the doctors. That's just what it is. But again, it's not just them. It's poets, it's professors, it's politicians, it's the physicians, it's engineers. Like literally, if you can name a profession, they have been targeted in Gaza. That's just it's not hidden at all. You know, there's no other than just lazily saying, yeah, they're all Hamas, whatever. There's no attempt to even hide this stuff. So. Yeah. So yes, are they targeting the doctors on purpose? Yes, but the reason is not specific to healthcare. The reason is because it's just part of the project of destroying the overall society.
Oh, okay. So I had a follow-up question, if that's okay, Taz.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, do you feel like have you or Dr. Perlmutter in any way have been intimidated, like in the United States, from people near you or in your community or in the medical community? So because you're such an important voice for the people, for the Gaza Strip?
Mark, you have more experience with this than me.
And by that he means that I think I get more death threats than almost any volunteer because I think I have the whitest face of all the volunteers, a
I
highly.
also meant it from like from a higher up level, not just like your random anonymous death threats.
Well, okay, so in the sense that we've had our lectures canceled literally at last minute at every major university. Even Feroze had one canceled at his alma mater. I gave one yesterday to my alma mater at Jefferson Medical College. That was the only one that wasn't canceled, but I couldn't show slides and my PowerPoint. Today, I received my cancellation for my talk tomorrow at Duke, where I was going to debate an English professor, a UNC English professor who's an IDF soldier. But because of Instagram posts that I did a year ago, they canceled my presentation. So academically, we're stifled. Professionally, I can't be hurt. I'm not an employee. I'm in private practice, but I may have been fired if I was in private, an employee of a hospital system. And many of them have had significant amount of academic pressure put on them. So I myself have no professional pressure put on me. I've had plenty of death threats, and even recently, and I don't take those seriously because you can't. You should maybe, but I can't. But academically speaking, your voice is stifled as much as it can be. My X account has been canceled forever. My Instagram account has been canceled forever. And you know,
Oh, I was actually just putting in the chat. Please make sure to follow and support them on Instagram. And you don't have an Instagram. They
yeah,
completely took that away, and X.
yeah.
Have you thought about kind of being more active on TikTok? It's less censored, I feel, and it really reaches the Gen Z audience who I think are largely pro-Palestinian and moving towards that.
Actually, that defeats my purpose. I want to reach baby boomers like me. We're the ones screwing it up. It's people that grew up as I did, being told that if you truly love Israel, then you have to be a Zionist. When I came back through Israel, through the West Bank, to head back into Amman, the Israeli soldier who looked at my passport looks up at me and goes and taps on my passport. He goes, you're not really liked in my country. And I said, I'd like to talk to you about that. I'm going to be here about 4 or 5 hours waiting for permission to get on into Amman. And I said, answer me a question. Do you know anything about the Nakba? And he goes, well, what is that? I go, well, why don't you educate yourself over the next half hour or so when you get a chance, and then hit me up and we can talk about it. And so this is a 23-ish, 4-ish-year-old guy who'd never even heard of it, and he's a military person. So, but it's part of the culture is not being educated about what their own history is. So I think you can convert people who are threatening to you and educate them about what the real problem is. And I've certainly had physicians track me down from Israel and saying I'm a proud physician and I'm a proud Zionist. And after an extended dialogue, one of them even signed, maybe two, signed a letter duplicating Feroze's authorship in the letter to Biden, which was duplicated in Israel, where I believe, Feroze, correct me if I'm wrong, I think over 300 Israeli physicians signed this letter asking for the Biden administration to stop funding Israel. And this was one of those guys who, maybe flipped is the wrong word, but I think you get my intent. This guy's opinion about Zionism was reversed because I told him you can't have that position and still honor your Hippocratic oath in any way. And Um, and so his words were, "I see the light." Um, and it actually took a risky step to declare his intent to oppose the United States assisting Israel.
Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Sidhwa. Doc, do you have any other questions? Otherwise, we will go to Sirda.
No, that's it. But I again want to say thank you from a Palestinian. You guys are amazing and doing the most, and we appreciate you guys.
Yeah, we wish we could do
Absolutely.
more. I promise you that.
Okay, we have next Sirda. He is a pharmacist from Gaza. Go ahead, Sirda.
Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, thank you, Taz, for hosting this amazing live with this amazing doctor. Also, our doctors, we are so proud of you, Wallah al-Azim, and may Allah reward you about your work. In Gaza, we are so proud of you, and we are so proud for anyone who is trying to support the people in the ground. You decide to come to Gaza and you decide to help the people directly in the ground, and that's more than appreciated, Wallah. And we have no words to say thanks for you. May Allah reward you, and Allah will reward you, inshallah, for your work and for your helping the people in the ground. Like, mashallah, you covered all the question which was in my head, really, يعني. But like, I have like some questions. Like the first one, you served in many area, and like you meet a lot of you meet a lot of doctor around the world. How you find the doctors in Gaza? They are qualified. They are. How is their education? How they are dealing under this situation? The amount of pressure which they are dealing with it.
First of all, the orthopedist that died in Israeli custody, the head orthopedist at Al Shifa Hospital, could have walked in and become the chief of orthopedics at any hospital in the United States or Western Europe. He was well published, extremely well respected, and could have easily emigrated to any country and headed up an academic institution. The orthopedists that I've worked with, likewise, we worked seamlessly together. Impressively qualified. The residents were wonderfully educated, no less educated than when a Duke resident comes to my operating room and works with me as a volunteer. So their training is perfect. Their skill set is immense. And if a pediatric hospital ever gets built in Gaza, which is a goal of ours, my proposition is to call it the Heroes Hospital, named after the Palestinian healthcare workers, both living and dead, because the work that Feroze and I did can't even remotely approach what they do on a daily basis. If I had to describe them in one word, elegant is the word I would pick.
Yeah,
And then,
they have learned what they needed to learn on the job, and surgically, the way I operate is actually different from the way they operate, but I actually learned quite a bit from being there. And actually, since I came back, I've operated twice with my residents and with my partners. Um, and both times they said, "Oh, what'd you just do there?" And I said, "Oh, this is something I learned in Gaza. Let me just show you this." It was actually pretty satisfying. I operated within my specialty. I operated a lot more this time than I did last time. And every time I operated this time was with a Palestinian surgeon, almost every single time, maybe one or two exceptions. And and in doing that, I actually did get to learn a lot from them because there's lots of, especially with surgery, there's lots of stuff that you just do and you never question because no one showed you how to do it differently. Then someone does it differently and you're like, whoa, Oh, maybe that's a good idea. The and so yeah, so no, I learned a lot from them. One thing that I'll say is that even despite having been cut off from the entire world for 20, 25 years at this point, um, they're actually because of it, they're so eager to learn. When I would when Pel they were constantly asking me like, what's the literature show about this? What does the literature show about this? Because they haven't been able to read a medical journal in forever. Only what they can pirate off the internet, basically. So yeah, no, it's they're very eager to learn. They're very eager to teach. Their residents are super. I still remember this kid Yahya. And you know, in the surgical residency in Palestine, like most of the world, is very, very hierarchical, and you really don't even start doing anything until you're like a fifth year resident. Their residency is longer than ours as well, but and they also work fewer hours during the week than we did. But I had him do the incision for an X-lap, and he had literally never done this by himself before. But I said, "Well, the patient's stable. Do the X-lap, man. You got to learn." So he did it way better than the first time I did it. I'll tell you that. So yeah, no, they're skilled. They're skilled because they've had to be. But they shouldn't be learning the way they're learning. They shouldn't be forced to learn in this Hobbesian hellhole of a place where they are just having to shut out the entire world and not think about the fact that their kids might be dead when they get home. You know, it's just impossible to learn properly under such. They still manage to do it. I don't know how. It's a Herculean task for every single one of them. But that's all I would say. Is it's like Dr. Sidhwa, it's not. I don't like to pretend that the Palestinians in Gaza are not human beings. They are. They have a limit. They have a breaking point, and they're showing. They really are showing what a human being can become under the most just obnoxious circumstances. But but that's not a reasonable thing to expect from people for a long time. Not that you were suggesting it. I'm just saying it to other people. Is that we cannot rely on the Palestinians' steadfastness, their samud, whatever you want to call it, to get to stop our crimes that we're committing over there. We have to take care of that ourselves.
May I say something real quick before we move on to Ahlam? Because Sardah is going to be too modest. He didn't get a proper introduction. He is a pharmacist in Gaza. He has helped a number of people with medical ailments on the ground. His plan was to rebuild his pharmacy and turn it into a walk-in clinic as well before this G-side resumed. So he is also a very valuable person on the ground in Gaza. W. Sardah.
I have yet to meet a person on the ground in Gaza who was not valuable. It's yeah, yeah, good. Thank you for doing all of that work, Dr. Sidhwa. And I'm sorry I'm not saying
Doctor, I have another question for you, doctors. You are already like covered all the suffer of Gaza people. Like you covered the starvation, you talk about the starvation, you talk about like also the lack of medication, lack of medical supplies, the suffer, the injuries, everything. But I want to ask you about something. Maybe you will find it not you because you like had an experience, but like the other will find it silly. How was your experience with the drone's voice 24 hours above your head, the Zanana voice? How that affect you? And what's your feeling when you left Gaza and you stop hearing this voice?
Mark, why don't you talk about that if you want to?
I have to speak to a psychiatrist. I hear a weed whacker outside my window and I cry. Several times I've grabbed my Amy at nighttime and tried to throw her on the floor when an airplane was flying over because we live 3 miles away from a little airport that just handles prop planes. And I get emotional when I hear a couple planes fly over at different altitudes. Not because I'm afraid of the bombing myself. It's just because the nightmares of that dead baby reaching up for and grabbing my pant leg And this year's traumas and last year's traumas just don't leave my head all night long. Um, so the sound of drones is something that gets replayed in my head. Feroze is a lot tougher than me. Um, it probably doesn't affect him as much, but I took a poll online, not online, but on our chat that we have on Signal, um, and the greatest majority of the many, many dozens of doctors on this chat line acknowledge that they have some form of PTSD over this, and some of them, not directly the effect of their stay there, but how they were treated when they got back by colleagues, and or how it affected their ability to practice. Um, my first couple of patients when I got back were, the routine thing that I see are carpal tunnels and things like that. It's my most common surgery, and it's my most common disease that I see and treat. And I'm thinking, like, shit, is that all you got? It's like I was rather insensitive um, to my significant other, rather insensitive to my patients, and you quickly reset your clock, but it affects all aspects of your life, and it did to many doctors, and many doctors have some form of PTSD over this. Not just doctors,
Yeah,
by doctors I mean nurses and other caregivers as well. Anybody who volunteered, therapists, they all do.
yeah. And there's a for anybody who wants to get a do I have the book here? For anybody who wants to get a sense of what it's like for people in Gaza, if they want to read a book about this, and I would encourage you to do so. There's a book by a fellow named Atef. I forget his last name, but it's called "Don't Look Left." That's the name of the book. The term is the title comes from when he was crossing through the Netzarim corridor with his son. He was telling him, "Don't look left" at the Israeli soldiers that were there. He also wrote a book about the 2014 war called "The Drone Eats with Me." Um, it's worth reading. Atef is he's a writer, he's an artist, and his account is quite moving, um, extremely disturbing, as you can imagine. But he describes how this sound is just maddening, how its incessant presence, the fact it just never ever ever goes away, to the point that I met two different people actually in Gaza who told me that when yes, his name is that thank you, somebody put it in the Atef Abu Saif, thank you, Linda. um, the It's to the point that I've met parents who've told me that when the drones go away, their children can't sleep because they think something's abnormal. They're used to that as almost as white noise, you know. The I still remember there was I met a cardiologist at Nasser. I don't remember his name. Young guy, he was about my age. He had four children, if I remember correctly, and the youngest one was 4 or 5 years old. She was a 4-year-old girl. So as she's a 4-year-old girl today. So basically, all of her living memory is this, whatever you want to call, has been happening in Gaza. And he lives in Rafah, and in the Philadelphia corridor, which is the very southern strip of the Gaza, the very southern part of the Gaza Strip, the border between Gaza and Egypt. In the Philadelphia corridor, the Israelis have built this very, very large sniper tower. It's not known, but a lot of people speculate that it actually has an automated gun in it that doesn't require a human being to actually pull the trigger. And this thing was firing into their house, and the whole family was in the house. So bullets were coming in through the window and through the wall, and the whole family hit the deck. Mom, dad, other three kids who were a little bit older, and the 4-year-old girl just kept dancing in a circle and singing to herself. And her family started saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? Come here, come here, come here. And she said, no, no, don't worry. The bullets are all the way up there. Look up there. Because she's tiny and the bullets were hitting up above the refrigerator. So mom and dad, bear crawled over to her and tackled her to try and keep her safe. This is, Mark says I'm tougher than him. That's not true at all. I'm just lucky. But in that it hasn't affected me directly. But these are this kind of damage. I mean, we go there for literally a few weeks, and I do still. I will tell you actually the one thing that I don't. I'm thankful that I don't have intrusive dreams about Gaza. But if I hear the sound, or even if I still hear a loud, an unusually loud backfire in a car, I still jump. And I have to remember, no, Feroze, you're in the States. Nothing bad is happening. But but for children who've grown up with this. I don't know that it's going to be possible to repair the damage that's been done to them. It is. I mean, children are very resilient, and Gazan children probably more so than anybody else. But again, this is you got to remember you're combining this with not that anybody here is confused about this. You're combining this with 15 months, or actually now 19 months of malnutrition, severe malnutrition. That is coming on top of about 10 years of chronic malnutrition that was happening before. I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 85% of Gazan children have been anemic since 2014. That's just outrageous. I mean, it is completely insane. The documented vitamin deficiencies, et cetera, and precisely because of the ongoing Israeli siege, it went back to 2014. Actually, to be fair, it goes back to 2007, but it really reached its lunatic phase in 2007 and 8. But yeah, so the psychiatric damage is real. It affects us, but more importantly, you got to remember, Gaza is half children. 15% of people in Gaza 15% of humans in Gaza are under the age of 5. It is very hard to understand and to predict how this will affect them. There was a Palestinian, I forget if he was a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and I'm totally, hopefully Linda can remind me of his name as well. But he was in Gaza, and somebody asked him about post-traumatic stress disorder, and he coined a term. He said, no, there's no such thing in Gaza as post-traumatic stress because the stress doesn't stop, or excuse me, because the trauma doesn't stop. So what he termed it as continuous traumatic stress syndrome, and that's what it is. And that's
Dr.
heavy
Iyad
major.
Sarraj, does that ring a bell?
Uh,
Dr. Iyad Sarraj?
that could be correct. I honestly don't remember. I feel terrible. He was. I think he was quite old when I was reading about him in college. So that was a while ago. But that could very well be it. He's a well-known Palestinian psychologist, and he wrote papers on this. It was not, it wasn't just his opinion. But the psychiatric damage is, the same thing is true of torture victims. I'm sorry, I know I'm talking about this for too long, but the same thing is true of torture victims. It's pretty well established that the physical wounds from torture, not for someone like Dr. Al-Bursh, who's murdered in custody, but for people who survive their torture, the physical wounds go away and the physical ailments go away, the physical symptoms go away, but it's the mental destruction. Mark and I know there's a nurse named Tamer that we met. Very, successful young fellow. He was married after he went to nursing school after high school. He got married. He had 2 small children. And he was shot in the operating room at Indonesian hospital, literally while working on a patient, because he was an orthopedic surgical nurse. And he was injured. His knee was destroyed, so he was injured quite badly. His own orthopedic team picked him up and fixed him. There's a Facebook photo of him from the next day in the hospital where you can see he's traumatized. There's no doubt about that. But this is a physical injury and a momentary deprivation of freedom, of safety, of things like that. That kind of thing somebody can get over. But what was done to him next is just absolutely impossible to recover from. I think we talked about this the last time we had what do you call this thing? TikTok Live. But he was taken to probably the Sedatium and torture chamber. He was strapped to a table for 45 days straight, fed a juice box every day or every other day, neglected so severely that the external fixator, the metal bar with pins that go into your bones, got infected, and beaten so badly that his right eye had to be removed when he was let go when he was finally thrown out of the prison. When he was thrown out of the prison, he was just dumped naked on the side of a road in the Gaza Strip, and then somebody brought him to European Hospital, which is where Mark eventually met him, and we worked on getting him a little bit better. Well, when we met him, he was dying of septic shock. So this man had been in septic shock probably for like 2 or 3 weeks at this point. Just he was young; he was only 29 years old, so he was able to compensate. Once we were able to get him antibiotics and figure out the source of his sepsis and take care of him properly, he got better physically. By the time we left, he was going outside in a wheelchair and things like that. But psychiatrically and psychologically and spiritually, whatever you want to say, he's completely destroyed. He just screams and cries for no reason. He wakes up screaming and crying, having no idea where he is. He's actually been evacuated to Egypt, but he won't let any of the nurses do anything because he's paranoid that everyone is an Israeli agent trying to kill him. So how are you gonna? And he's hardly the only one. So this he doesn't know if his children are alive or dead. He doesn't know if his wife are alive or dead. Yeah, somebody just wrote who could possibly recover. Yeah, I don't know. No matter how much help you give that person, it is impossible to recover them. And again, this goes back to what somebody was asking before: why target the doctors? It's just the same reason as you're targeting everybody else. I mean, it's very hard to figure out in why in this instance or that instance this kind of maniacal killing machine chooses to torture people this way or to kill them that way. But the fact of the matter is, this is what it looks like when you just destroy an entire society from the bottom down and the top up. The top down and the bottom up.
Thank you, Sidhwa. Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter and
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sidhwa.
I have a lot to say it, but I will inshallah, for the shortness of time, inshallah, we will meet you, inshallah, later.
In
But
Gaza.
your next visit to Gaza, you should be my guest, both of you. And we don't want you to come as a doctor. We want you to come as a guest, inshallah, and you should be my guest.
I hope so
Inshallah.
soon, my friend. I hope so soon.
Thank you, W. Sidhwa. Allah yahmeek. We'll go next to Ahlam.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so you guys said so much, but there was one question that I did really want to ask. But before that, I wanted to say, Dr. Perlmutter, the reason why your debate with the ex-IDF got canceled was definitely because you would cook them. So just know that they're definitely afraid of that. And then I did also want to say that, I have a lot of respect for doctors specifically. A lot of my family members are doctors or nurses. They work specifically in pediatrics or surgery. And I know that from us Palestinians, a lot of the doctors who are Palestinians, it's because they have in their head that, we can help our people with that they want to do that because they want to help our people. So I have respect for you guys and for anybody who is with organizations like Doctors Without Borders or all of those other organizations where they send doctors to these types of countries that need assistance. So that's honestly just a huge shout out for you guys and massive respect. Just wanted you guys to know that. One of the questions I did want to ask, you had mentioned how you're not able to bring your own supplies in and that they'll stop you from bringing your own supplies, even something as small as a suture kit, right?
Right.
Is there have you guys thought about alternatives, even if they're everyday items that can be used for surgery? And were you guys able to ever try something like that, like bringing in anything, even if it's not necessarily a surgical instrument, but using it for surgery?
Yes. I mean, you can MacGyver your way through a lot of things. I've soaked plastic zip ties in alcohol to sterilize them and use those to cinch bones together. Yeah, the wound's going to be infected anyway. About 100% of wounds get infected. And then the implant has to be taken out. You hope that the bone heals before the infection destroys the bone. But I've literally used zip ties from Lowe's, the same ones you'd buy at Lowe's, to hold bones together. That's something that would be impressively illegal to do in every developed country. It would be illegal for me to leave a drill bit in somebody. So you have to innovate because of the supplies are not available. I used vinegar to sterilize a wound. You have when you don't have supplies, you'd use just do the best you can. We would sew wounds together and deliberately leave them open to make room for the anticipated pus to drain. Something I mean, I operate in the rainforest of Honduras, 3 hour drive at the end of the last paved road, and I don't do that. Um, so, and infections are common in that environment, and I still would never do that. So you do have to innovate, but the specialty work, that even a general orthopedist does requires some instruments, and the hospitals were fairly equipped. They didn't have all the sterilization equipment to clean the instruments perfectly, but there was enough existing surgical instruments for us to do what we needed to do. That never seemed to be much of a problem. The real lack of supplies were soap, antibiotics, anesthesia, dressings, dispensable items, disposable items. Um, those are the lifeblood of any modern hospital. That's the grease that keeps all the machinery turning, and those were non-existent.
Did the IDF know that, like, for like zip ties, right? Like, would they take that? Would they confiscate that from you guys? Would they know that you were bringing alternative items?
They would take anything they thought would have an alternative use for war, or anything that would benefit a human being. There's no way that my surgical instruments, which are small little tweezers, can be interpreted as a weapon or be repurposed as a weapon. Um, and my biggest instrument was smaller than an eyebrow tweezer. Um, and you need that for nerve repairs, um, and so there's no way that they took them because they could be thought they could be repurposed, and they're clearly surgical instruments, wrapped in a surgical instrument packet, with a letter on the front of it in Hebrew saying these are microsurgical instruments for nerve repairs. So there's no mistake in what they were. They were deliberately confiscated because they would benefit another human being, just not an Israeli human being. Um, but to your point, the innovation is widespread. Feroze did a surgery a year ago where he left a clamp on an artery or vein rather overnight. Closed the butt end of the clamp was sticking out of his belly. I've never saw anything like that in my life. It was brilliant of him to do, um, and it saved that person's life to stage the surgery. So I've closed wounds with rubber bands, zigzagging them back and forth across the skin, letting the tension of the rubber band, a regular rubber band, pull the skin together.
Thank
I
you,
honestly,
Dr.
I don't have
Perlmutter.
like words. Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead,
that's you guys are
Hannah.
amazing, mashallah. No, I don't have words for that, bro. What the hell? Like, mashallah, that's amazing.
I don't know if Dr. Sidhwa, you wanted to also add on top of that, but that is, I'll give you a few minutes if you did.
No, I would just say that it's Mark's 100% right about what he's saying. That they one thing that you don't want to get caught up in the game of is trying to figure out why the Israelis did something. You can again, you don't. It's you will get you would have to spend the next 150 years looking up the reason that the Israelis did this on that day and this on that day and this on that. It's all just arbitrary nonsense. It has nothing there's no rhyme or reason for it beyond just hurting people at this point. Um, yeah, that's uh, just pretty obvious. It's if it's a much simpler explanation than oh well, yeah, we thought Mark's microsurgical instruments were weapons, right? But but just so anybody understands, we're not talking about taking in oh, I'm a surgeon and I'm going to bring in this pallet of stuff with me, or I'm going to bring in this truck full of medical equipment. No, we're literally talking about the stuff that goes in your backpack. That's it. And even the Israelis are so petty and ridiculous that they're getting down to the point of looking into individual physicians' backpacks. And what do you think, Mark? Maybe 15 doctors go in and out of Gaza every month.
That's right.
Maybe, and most of them, maybe half of them are surgeons. Maybe probably a little bit less. So to the petty and absurd degree of making sure that half a dozen people don't bring surgical instruments into Gaza for their own personal use that they purchased themselves. That is And just to be clear, these are uniformed Israeli security people doing this. That tells you something about what Israel's security problems actually are in Gaza. They have very little to do with actual security. You would think that if there was a war going on, there would be people. Those people would maybe be doing something related to a war. Instead, they're pulling surgical instruments out of a 70-year-old doctor's backpack. Okay, it tells you something about what's going on.
Oh, thank you so much, Ahlam. Thank you, Dr. Sidhwa and Dr. Perlmutter. Somebody mentioned in the comments that you should write a book of everything that you have both witnessed and experienced and saw. And I want to also double down on that and say, I hope you do write a book of some sort where we can hear everyone needs to hear these stories.
We're well, unfortunately, no one reads books anymore. But Mark and I actually have been asked by a publishing house to do that, and I'm in the middle of kind of drafting uh, an outline and stuff like that. If
Oh,
anybody wants to
phenomenal.
read, if anybody wants to read a synopsis, I don't know, a shorter version, not book length, of what we did while we were in Gaza. We did write more of like a narrative thing in Politico. It's an American journal, but it's free online. There's no paywall.
Yeah,
Just
what can we
search,
look up? Is there
just search for
something?
Mark Perlmutter Politico, Politico.
Okay,
It'll be.
perfect.
I'm
Yes.
guessing it's the first thing that. Is it the only thing you've published in Politico? Because it's the only thing I've published in Politico.
So yeah.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, amazing. And then people are saying even like audiobooks or whatever it is that you can provide, we will do our best to support in any way possible. And again, thank you so much from all of us. There's 300 people here listening. Thank you for everything that you have done. We appreciate all of your efforts and anything that we can do to help support you. And I know you said you wanted to hopefully one day build a hospital in Gaza. We will stand by you and we will help build that brick by brick. So inshallah, please we will, let us know more about that. And inshallah, one day we will see a free Palestine and we will be united in a free Palestine in Gaza to help rebuild all of the infrastructure and help rebuild all of Gaza. I wanted to thank you both again so much for joining us tonight. Um, Everything that you have spoken and have said. It's heartbreaking. It's a lot of it was hard for a lot of people to hear, but this we have to hear and we have to be able to tell these stories and listen and tell everyone these stories, pass it along to anyone that needs to hear this because this is the true reality of what is going on in Gaza. Thank you to our heroes, Dr. Palmiter and Dr. Sidhwa, again for joining us today. We truly appreciate all of your efforts.
Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you.